Hi guys, so in today's video, I'd like to introduce to you what machine learning is, as well as the main types of machine learning algorithms. Machine learning is a field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. And there are two main types of machine learning algorithms. The first one is supervised learning. Supervised learning involves algorithms that learn X to Y. And what do I mean by this? Well, they learn input to output mappings. Give your learning algorithm examples to learn from, and these examples include the right answer. And the algorithm learns to take the input itself and then predict an output based on the datasets it's been trained on. So one example of this is regression. I'll draw a data table and let's say we'll do a housing price prediction. Okay, we'll have the data that this algorithm would be trained on, right? So say we have the size of a home, right? So in square feet, and then the price of these homes. But say we plot the data like this, and you can see that this data has a line of best fit. So in this case, it would be linear regression. So the algorithm would use these data points to predict the output of an input it's been given, right? So say we give it an input of a house with square feet of this much, right? So it would use the data it's been given, right, the blue dots, to predict the price of this home. And it would do this by using regression, which is what this line is. The second example of supervised learning is classification. Well, classification involves trying to predict a small number of possible outputs or categories instead of regression, which in regression, we try to predict really any number. Let me give you an example of this. Say we have a data table, right? One part of the data table will represent tumor size. So say we have a bunch of different data points. So say we have one that's like 7, 6, 4, 2, and it doesn't matter the units for now. I'm just coming up with really just random numbers. And then this side of the column will represent the diagnosis. And we'll say that 0 represents benign. Benign means basically a harmless disease, right? So this tumor size does not cause disease or something harmful, right? Then 1 will represent malignant, which is harmful, okay? So say we have these data points. So our learning algorithm will use this data right here to predict whether a tumor size of 5 will be malignant or benign. So maybe it might use this data to predict that, hey, this tumor size will result in diagnosis of malignant, okay? I don't know, I'm just making up random numbers, but this is the general idea of it. You can see that in classification, which is this thing right here, the model outputs really only two outputs, 0 or 1 for benign or malignant. So there is a finite number of values that it returns. Whereas in regression, and these are both types of supervised learning, right? But in regression, the model could have outputted really any price, right? And we give the model a data point, I don't know, here, right? Might say that the price is going to be here because this is where the data point would land. And really, you could give it any input, right? Because it's linear, right? There's really an infinite amount of outputs that this regression model could return. So that's the main difference between classification and regression. Okay, so now let's move on to unsupervised learning. This is the other main type of machine learning algorithm. So in unsupervised learning, we're just given the inputs and not any corresponding output for those inputs. So the algorithm on its own tries to find something interesting in this unlabeled data. And the main goal of unsupervised learning is to discover hidden and interesting patterns in unlabeled data. So unlike supervised learning, unsupervised learning methods cannot be directly applied to a regression or classification problem, as you don't know what the values for the output might be. So say you have some data, I'll make another graph. X-axis will represent the tumor size. And the y-axis, let's say it'll represent 8. Okay, and we have all these data points. And this has nothing to do with whether it's malignant or benign yet, because we don't know, right? We're not given the output. We're just given the data points, the input, right? We don't know what this exactly corresponds to. So the goal of unsupervised learning is to find patterns on its own, right? Structures in the data. And unsupervised learning, in this example, might figure out that, hey, there's a cluster here and a cluster here. So it's found some specific thing in the in the structure of this data. And this is called clustering. Clustering is a type of unsupervised learning, okay? And clustering basically involves grouping similar data points, like we did here. Another type of unsupervised learning is anomaly detection, and this involves finding unusual data points. So kind of like finding an outlier. So say in this data, there was a point down here, right? This unsupervised learning algorithm, specifically anomaly detection, might figure out that, hey, this point right here is an outlier, right? And it finds that in the structure of the data. So that's really the two main types of machine learning. And just to summarize, supervised learning is a category of machine learning that uses labeled data sets to train algorithms, predict outcomes, and recognize patterns. So we saw that classification and regression were two types of supervised learning algorithms. And then in unsupervised learning, it's typically used to solve several problems in, pattern recognition based on unlabeled training data sets. That's very key there. Unlabeled training data sets. And examples of this are clustering and anomaly detection. Okay, thank you for watching.